looks at me and he says, "You don't know where powdered milk comes from?" And I'm like, "No, Dad, where does it come from?" And he's like, "Well, sit down and let me tell you a story." This is the story of why I absolutely detest things like April Fools and pranks and anything associated with it. I've never liked them. I've been pranked in college. I thought it was fucking stupid. I cannot stand pranks. My dad, very specifically my dad, growing up, loved April Fools. He loved playing pranks. And this is like one of those things where you look at your family and you're like, I fucking hate that you did this to me. This is one of those stories to me. This is one of those things where I look back and I'm like, screw you for doing this to me, because arguably this definitely did not help the fact that I got beat up and bullied in school. The story goes like this. We were backpacking. I don't know if you guys have ever been backpacking. Backpacking is pretty close to like real camping for me. So we went backpacking. What would happen when you'd go backpacking is you would wear like a pack and you'd put like your food in it and your sleeping wear, and you'd hike 5 to 10 miles into the woods, away from cell phones, away from people, away from everything. And you'd stay there for a few days. And normally we went in what's called the Porcupine Mountains. It was very common for us. There was like waterfalls and stuff. There's a lot of really cool like memories I have from doing this. Like one time we built a dam in a river, which was really cool. Also probably killed a lot of wildlife without realizing it because we changed the way that the water was. But that dam lasted like years, which is cool. So we hike into the woods. We get there, and one of the things that we would take with us, because we didn't do like MREs or anything like that, which are like army issued like meals that you pour water into and you eat. I know a lot of backpackers do that because they're very light. We didn't do that. We went like the cheaper route that caused you to have to carry more weight. So we'd bring like noodles and stuff with us, and like mac and cheese was pretty common. A lot of different like boxed meals that were dry and that you could add water and milk to make them taste semi-decent. However, bringing milk into the woods is not really plausible because you don't have any refrigeration. Okay, so it'll go bad. So what you do is you bring dried milk and then you add it to some water and then you mix it together and you pour it into your dish in order to add milk to it, so it still has a decently creamy flavor. Now, let me preface this by saying that I was very young. I was going into 2nd grade. Okay, so that might have meant I was 7. Okay, I was like 7 or 8. I had never seen dried milk before because living with both of my family, we never used dried milk. You don't use it for anything. I got very acquainted with dried milk later on in my life because my dad was he ended up losing his job because he had a brain tumor and we couldn't afford milk and shit like that. Also, milk was insanely expensive. At the time, I'd never seen dried powdered milk before. So I ask my dad, because me being the inquisitive child that I am, I ask him, "Dad, where does powdered milk come from?" Something you need to know about my dad. My dad is a great storyteller. So my dad, being the inquisitive storyteller that he was, okay, he's also very good at convincing people. You know what? My dad's like motto to me, and I take this to heart, okay? And I really agree with this, okay? If you can't wow them with intelligence, baffle them with bullshit. My dad understood that. He could have been a great con artist. So my dad, being the person that he was, looks at me and he says, "Blake, you don't know where powdered milk comes from?" And I look at him and I say, "No, Dad, where does powdered milk come from? How do they make milk dry?" Now, at this point, I would like to say I didn't know about dehydration or anything like that. I was 8 years old, so fuck you if you're judging me right now. My dad looks at me, and looking back now, I could just imagine the inquisitive smile that gets on his face like, "Oh yeah, it's time to fuck with Blake." He looks at me and he says, "You don't know where powdered milk comes from?" And I'm like, "No, Dad, where does it come from?" And he's like, "Well, sit down and let me tell you a story." What preceded was a story something like this. "Blake, you know how regular milk comes from cows, specifically in like the Midwest and stuff like that? How we have like lots of cows around us? I grew up in Upper Michigan, just an FYI. I was like, "Yeah, Dad, of course. They get the milk from the udders, right? They have people who milk the cows." It's like, "That's right, Blake. That's right. Milk comes from cows, right? Where do you think powdered milk comes from? And I was like, I don't know, Dad. That's why I'm asking you. And he was like, well, Blake, down south, you know how it gets really dry? Yeah, Dad, of course it's dry. It's like desert down there. Well, down south, where there isn't a lot of water, they have special cows. These are called dust cows, Blake. And I'm like, really, Dad? And he's like, yeah, they're called dust cows. Okay, and they produce powdered milk. Much like a cow in the Midwest where you grab the udders and it goes quick, quick, quick. Well, there's cows down south in the desert that because it's so dry, they don't produce actual milk, they produce powdered milk. So when you use the udders, it goes and they shoot all of the powdered milk into a fucking bucket and then they ship it off just like they do regular milk. It gets worse. So I'm like, really, Dad? And he's like, yeah, of course. Can't you just imagine? Like, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. Okay, now, I didn't bring it up for the rest of the weekend. I just took it at fact. Okay, I just believed him. This is like the slow degradation, or is that the right word? The slow depreciation of my childhood innocence to where I'm very cynical. This is one of the reasons why I'm cynical about the fucking world, okay? If there's like any reason, this is definitely one of those stories that made me more cynical about literally everything on the planet. And this was not the only time that he got me like this with a fucking story. So, how it gets worse. We finish backpacking the entire weekend. We go home. I drive back to my mother's because my parents are split up. At school in the 2nd grade, we had what's called show and tell. I don't know if they have that anymore for you young people out there, but we had show and tell when I was a kid. So, I'm thinking about, do I have something to bring to show and tell? I was like, oh yeah, I remember this story my dad told me about dust cows and I bet you no one else knows about this. So, late at night, I grab a fucking Ziploc bag and I look through our cabinets and I find powdered milk. I filled the bag up with fucking powdered milk, I lock it up and I put it in my backpack. Now, I get a bag of powdered milk. Don't worry, it gets worse still. We have not hit the point where it starts to get better yet, okay? I grab a bag of powdered milk and I put it in my backpack and I wake up early and I'm so excited and I go to school. First thing in the morning, one of the things we would do was show and tell and I was so excited. I was like, my teacher's name was Mrs. Pumala. I did not like her. I did not get along with her. That being said, I go up to her and I say, I have a show and tell today. And she's like, oh, really? I was like, yeah. Go through. I think some other people did some cool things that they showed and told. I'm so excited. They call my name. I go up there and I bring a bag of powdered milk with me. And I look in front of the classroom and I was like, I learned this weekend that powdered milk comes from dust cows in Texas. That's right. They have cows that literally you milk the udders and out comes powdered milk. It still gets worse. My teacher, being the teacher she was, corrected me in front of the class. She was like, Blake, my teacher said, Blake, and she wasn't mean this time. It wasn't like she was mean about it. She was like, Blake, I just want you to know that's not true at all. Powdered milk doesn't come from dust cows in Texas. I did not like this teacher and I did not believe her and I didn't think that my dad could lie to me. So why would I believe her over my dad? And so in front of the entire classroom, I go, yes, it does. My dad told me and you're a liar. And she was like, no, Blake, I'm not, and they don't. And so then we started arguing back and forth. We're like, you're just a lying teacher. She had to pull me out of the classroom and bring me to the principal's office because I refused to believe that my dad could lie to me about powdered milk and my teacher would tell the truth. I get brought to the principal's office where the principal also tries to tell me. And at this point, I've made my bed and I'm just gonna lay in it, okay? I'm not going back. Whether or not other people tell me, I'm like, no, I don't believe you. My dad told me this and I'm going to believe him. They call up my dad and he tries to talk to me on the phone and tell me, listen, Blake, I was just kind of like, no, you're not. You're just lying. You're just trying to tell me that to agree with them. He had to drive an hour and a half because my parents lived an hour and a half apart. He had to drive an hour and a half to the fucking school in order to sit with me, in order to tell me that he was just kidding and it was a joke. At which point I believed him That cute, probably the reason I got beat up for the rest of my elementary and high school days, because I was not popular at all. Oh, hello there. I hope you enjoyed this video, so make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Shout out to all my Patreons who support me. If you're looking to support me, you can join my Patreon at patreon.com/improvblake, and you can also find me streaming throughout the week at twitch.tv/improvblake. Thank you.